I think it's actually a great time to be in technology in the federal space. There's a lot of interesting things going on. And what's most heartening to see is the support we get from Congress in terms of sort of really making these as a priority through
Hmm.
things such as the TMF funds and such. So I think we are witnessing something very special, right, in terms of the inflection point around modernization, a lot of digital government and citizen support, things of that nature. So, as a director of enterprise architecture, I'm very excited for the work that we are doing.
Mm.
I've been in the role for 7 years at the IRS, and I can tell you, not any quarter is a copy of the previous quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's government. We've got to go through all the processes and things of that nature. But in terms of the mission and the challenges and the opportunities, some really great accomplishments that we've accomplished. So I was thinking about how to sort of tell the story here. And the IRS is tends to be in the microscope. Public has a high demand. Congress has a high expectations from what we do and what we deliver. And I can tell you, at least of last year, I think we have done amazing in terms of the global pandemic crisis. About a year back from now, we had the entire economy tank, and then in literally 3 weeks or so, when the first CARES Act was passed, we had really been able to push out economic impact payments, which is the stimulus payments, out to like 150 million payments were made, and all of that programming, all of that processes, everything was just set up in about 3 weeks and had been sent out. So before I go deeper into the digital transformation and the modernization story at the IRS, I thought it'll be useful to set a little bit of context, to kind of introduce IRS, if you will. So I'll do a little bit of a, IRS by the numbers here. Um, so basically, we are a pretty large organization, one of the more larger ones in federal government. We have, about 80,000 employees IRS wide. There are also some seasonal employees that come in during filing season. We have about 7,200 IT employees with a $3 billion IT budget. Um, and then I've got some facts and figures up there. We collect $3.5 trillion in taxes. And, some people say taxes are what makes, a civilization. So clearly we collect majority of the federal budget through taxes. On any average year, we are issuing about 120 or so or more refunds, and totaling up to billions of dollars of refund money as well. The other thing that is sort of interesting is that sometimes not quite perceived, if you don't know well. We have over 10,000, actually almost 11,000 revenue officers, revenue agents. So IRS obviously does the audit. So we are an audit company, financial auditing. We are a collection company. If you were to be a private sector equivalent. So we are doing collections. We are doing financial audits. We are also a law enforcement agency. We have over 2,000 criminal investigators that are enforcing the law, especially those that are broken with a criminal intent, right? So we partner with Federal Bureau of Investigation and other crime, criminal investigation federal agencies. And then we have over 1,400 tax attorneys. So that makes us larger than probably any average law firm that you might find. So it's a very interesting model, the business model that we are in. But at the heart of all of it is we are a service organization and we process a lot of information data. So data is our asset, and the support and the service we provide to taxpayers or those who don't necessarily pay taxes but are in the ecosystem. They may be exempt or whatever, right? So providing them service, enforcing the tax law and doing it fairly, across the board. That's our mission, and IT is here to support those. So that's a quick, by the numbers intro as I kind of go into what the IRS does. Oh yeah, a couple of other things, beyond taxes, some of the things that's really starting to happen. Most recently, I would say in the last decade, is we are getting into this space where federal government and the public's relationship about in different areas, IRS is becoming the delivery point. So again, the most recent example would be the economic impact payment. It's not a tax; it's treated as, it's like a credit to your net refund. So I think it's the legal term is like credits to your taxes. But we are the federal arm that is essentially interacting with the public to make those payments. We collected your bank information, we collected, are you eligible or not? So we are providing even data services to say, okay, who's eligible, who's not, and who's qualified or not. A little bit before that, so earlier in the last decade, was the Affordable Care Act, which is where we got into the healthcare business. Not that we are doing any healthcare, but information about healthcare, reconciliation of your premium payments at the end of the year, right? Those types of business processes IRS is handling. So it really creates quite a complex business model that we are in. And some of the other things that the IRS does, we run a lot of volunteer programs, for example, to serve the underserved communities. We offer free tax assistance. We offer low income tax clinics, then tax assistance for elderly, and so on. And one final comment would be, in times of disaster, our call centers that we run, we turn all the phone lines up to FEMA, and not just the phone lines, but the staff, right? So people are really taking calls in a disaster mode. So that's another thing that the IRS does, because we've got the infrastructure ready and can turn on a dime. Uh, so that's kind of what the IRS business model is. So I'd like to kind of go to talk a little bit about technology, right? So what's going on in technology space? Let me move my slides here to keep up. Um, we do have what I call the quote unquote a legacy problem. A quick story. The first computers in the IRS came in 1961, and we actually still have applications, and in fact, some of our core applications that manage the individual tax account, the business tax accounts. They are close to 55 years or more. They were written originally in the 60s, 70s. Um, at the same time, we have the most modern applications you can think of. We have bots, we have AI models running. So we have really the entire range spanning technology. The problem with some of the legacy ones are that it's running in a latest data center, it's secure, running on the most modern hardware, but the software and the data architecture is still old. So that means it's inflexible. It's difficult to make quick changes, make it agile. It doesn't lend to agile practices, things of that nature. And then, of course, with this long history of one of being the earliest computerized automated processing, or in the federal government, the unfortunate consequence is that we have this really long list and accumulated legacy architecture, and also a lot of technology debt. So that's definitely weighing us down. The other thing is workforce. Knowledge, expertise walks out the door every time somebody's retiring or getting ill, right? As people obviously age and so on. So that's something we have to really deal with. Those are our big challenges, but we have taken it head on. Our modernization approach and program is really comprehensive. And what I thought I'll bring the story here for your audience is not any one particular project diving in deeper, but just sort of give you a taste of what's going on from as a palette. So our vision is that we will be running, at some point, and we have to get there, running majority of our core applications, whether they're customer service apps or they're core tax processing or case management, that will be running them in cloud. Our big tenant and goal and vision is really digitize, and make really modern access points for customer interaction. So all of the engagement points, unify the channels, whether it's on the phone by when they call, or they actually, use a web app or a phone app. And in some cases, taxes can be complicated. They want to talk to somebody. They may even want to walk in a tax assistance center, which of course with the pandemic, those things are have been reduced and so on. But it also is forcing us to really become digital as a digital enterprise. It's pushing us, it's accelerating that demand. But at the heart of all of this is, while we modernize the engagement systems, the big challenge is what's at the heart, at the core. And at the core of our IRS trust systems are those legacy apps that are decades old. And we've got to fix them. We've got to modernize them. So we're looking at a variety of different strategies. We are looking at rewriting. We are looking at conversion tools. We are looking at, can we chunk them away into smaller sub apps, services? So looking at a variety of different techniques to slowly sort of break into this core application set that is decades old. And when we make that more agile, more flexible, that's not dependent on sort of big, huge bulk file transfer types of techniques that we've had used. They were state of the art back then, in the 60s and the 70s, but not anymore. So we've got a lot of re-architecting to as well do as we modernize. So for us, digital transformation isn't just about digital interaction, but it is actually to enable that, we have to really modernize the core. We've got to reduce our IT footprint, and we have to get into the latest tech stack. Some of the other things we are doing is we're really trying to envision a future where inside of the IRS there will be no paper. So even if a tax-paying entity or a person sends a paper, which they can, we can't legally bar them, but we don't want to process the paper anymore. So that's our vision, and so that's where we are headed. We've already made some very significant progress in that space, and in terms of paper form uploads on our website, and we are also doing more and more with signatures processing, where we are accepting digital signatures. So some really cool and interesting things are happening there. A couple of last points I'll mention is about data. Right, as I said, that we are fundamentally a data processing entity, right? We just ingest lots of data every day, every year. We process them, we analyze them for a variety of reasons and business functions. One of the big ones is fraud detection, fraud prevention. One of the kudos to the IRS over the last 5 years, the the return review program has prevented $30 billion of fraud. So imagine that, right? It just pays for itself over and over again. It's like 1,600% ROI that program delivers to the federal government. The last point I was going to make is about security and cybersecurity, data protection, managing our vulnerabilities. So all of the principle in terms of how we approach our IT and our business functions is security is not something of an afterthought. We don't go back to review, revise at the moment of trying to test it to go to production. It's baked in from the very beginning. So pushing it to the left of the cycle. So those are the real goals and broad directional push that we have in our modernization program. So I'm going to go into a little bit more, give you some official views of what the modernization plan actually is. So back in 2019, we had published the official authorized, what's known as we call it the mod plan, but the official name is the IRS integrated modernization business plan. It's published on our website. It's a quick, easy search, and if those of your audience that would like to read it, welcome to read that. It's a very interesting document, and it gives you a very nice purview of our vision of where we are headed. So officially, this plan has sort of 4 big pillars. I already talked about them a little bit, right? Looking at the front end of the engagement for taxpayer and their experience. That's the one big pillar. And then the next pillar is the core taxpayer services and enforcement. So these are all our internal processes around our master data management, our account management. So individuals or businesses, or even non-paying, so tax exempt or other government entities that don't necessarily pay taxes, but they interact with us. So all of the processing. And then case management, and so compliance, enforcement, looking at that entire space, modernizing them. There's a big project going on, which we call ECM, the Enterprise Case Management. that really enforces and looks at all our casework. One interesting bit of information is we have, based on how we count, we may have about between 60 to 100 different siloed case management systems. So our goal here is to unify them into a single sort of a view where access to case information, to the case history, and go back in time to research case history and records. That's our vision, that we want to get to that point where, and plus the other payoff would be we would be able to then retire a lot of these legacy systems. So any of our modernization efforts are also are paired with kind of a companion retirement of something legacy, because we've got a lot of legacy that we have to deal with. The third pillar I wanted to talk about that is the modernized IRS operations. So these are all the enablers. So this is where we are talking about cloud. We're talking about really investing significantly into our data and analytics program. We've got AI based. Like we've already done several bots, not just pilots or tests, but actually in production. We want to get further into where it's not just a basic bot, but can it be intelligent bots? So we're looking into some of those more emerging technologies and bring them in. Um, and then the last pillar is the cybersecurity data protection. So structurally, the mod plan has four major pillars, and it requires a significant amount of funding. It was published in 2019. It was a 6-year plan. We were not funded at the level we were hoping, so we'll go as fast as we can, and we appreciate the funding we get, and we'll the journey will continue. What I wanted to do is sort of pivot to, give a kind of a sense of what has been accomplished, and quite a few things have been done. So this slide's, got a bit of busy set of statements, but I'd like to pick out a few that I think are really noteworthy. That this IT workforce that today I'm representing, I'm very proud of, and our leadership team is great with our CIO Nancy Seeger. So some of the accomplishments, right? So we have already done a lot of digital interactions, right? We have had a web program for many years now, mobile apps coming up for calculations, for file uploads. You can look up your account, make a payment, look up your documents. And we can increasingly, add functionality to that. One of the great things is that we brought in agile practices and DevOps practices as we build out these types of programs. So that's a great accomplishment under this Smart Plan program. We're also doing lots of chatbots. Started with some internally to kind of get comfortable, make sure we understand what we're doing. But we are going into the place where we are looking forward, more additional, voice-based and AI-enabled sort of bots, voice bots, chat bots. But right now we have mostly, the typical automation bots that are running routine tasks repeatedly and sort of gaining efficiency. So we've got some of those bots done. Um, the other thing that I said, that one of the big accomplishments is that ECM. We just recently deployed late last year the first major use case into production. It's running in cloud, and it's just the first big step. Over time, we will have many more pieces of case management functions come over. And on the flip side, we will start looking at retiring and decommissioning those items as well. Then one last thing, probably a double dipping on the credit there. As I said, that we have the return review program. In the last 5 years, we've already saved $30 billion by preventing tax fraud, and it's a great accomplishment. And we are doing even more. We are expanding the return review program to look at additional types of returns that are filed, and additional types of returns that we get, to really do more anomalies and matching of facts, so that we can find problems in tax filing. The last, what I would say, is a very significant modernization is the program name is CADE2, which is really our account engine. That is the individual tax account management program, and that's the one that's the oldest. it in the federal government, the current system is called the IMF, the Individual Master File, and that's like 50 plus 55 years or old. And that one plus another one, there are two programs out of 10 that are the oldest, and it's even in a GAO report that the federal government has significant risk. But we are working it. We've been working it for some time to modernize that, and we are well on our way to rewrite core components of that program in Java. But there will still be more to do, and I'll talk a little bit about that in my looking ahead slide. Um, the other thing that obviously happened, I think it's across the government and private sector, the pandemic just blew us out in terms of pushing us to become more, remote enabled, or, just look at digital interaction. So a lot of video conferencing capabilities have been turned on. Literally within a few weeks to a month or so, we scaled telework to the point that where we had about, any given day we would have maybe 8 to 10,000 people teleworking to at its 61,000 was the peak that we had enabled. We do have some folks that do have to come to work because of the nature of their work, or because maybe they need still access to some paper files that they have to be in the office. But generally speaking, it's really changed us as an organization, and clearly it tells us that when we are pushed, as many federal agencies have been, we've really pushed ourselves to adapt and change with it. Lastly, I'd like to go ahead to looking ahead. So where are we going here? The modernization program or a plan isn't really a new plan. We've been working on it for some time, but we are also including different facets into the overarching view as we think about our future. So one of the elements that we are now going to, and we have been really focusing on, is really our people, workforce. So it's one of our strategic goals and a priority to really hire, train, replace, and develop a workforce for the future that can sustain and grow, the IRS to serve our taxpayers. The other pillars here of looking ahead, we will continue to deliver on not only the modernization goals that I talked about, but there's just a lot more that is coming up. For example, we are, when I mentioned K2, which is the major master account, we still have a significant amount of legacy ALC code that is still core processing. So we will be soon launching another program which will actually retire the individual master file and will decommission that. That is going to be a multi-year effort. It's supposed to be kicking off here very soon as we have some funding approvals arranged. But we've got a great plan. We actually worked on it hard last several quarters to put together a very comprehensive plan internally, and I think it'll be ready in about another month or so. And then once funding, etc., works up, we'll go into starting a major retirement and decommissioning program for the IMF, the individual master file. And on top of it, we are accelerating a lot on the cybersecurity, data protection, data encryption, vulnerability management, zero trust. So a lot of different, as you would hear, industry trends around that space. We are bringing in those technologies and those processes to protect our main asset, our data, and of course our people. Then I wanted to talk about data, which is we have made this a big, kind of a priority. We now have a chief data architect, and I believe the IRS is working with Treasury around the role of a CDO as well. We do have a chief analytics officer, and I think that one doubles up as the CDO right now. And then, but in terms of what we are going to be doing is we got to turn all of this data that we still have locked up in files, or maybe even in records, in databases that we just don't have access to. So this is sort of this dark space with no visibility, no process that touches the data. It just comes in and waits. So we have data, make it an asset, make it accessible. A big program going to be kicking off in terms of creating platforms that allow that. We do have some, I would say again, a couple of decades old data initiatives that sort of have run out their ability to serve the future needs. So we do see a big modernization in our data environment as well. And then, innovation. There are, we are looking at emerging areas. We are looking into AI-enabled ops in how we can sort of really become more efficient and streamline support. We'll probably start something like that internally and then explore that to provide that for taxpayers. And then really broaden the footprint of DevOps, kind of really, the ways of working beyond some of the projects that we have that got an early start. We are bringing them in across the board. So it's not just the innovation in the market, but it's still innovation for that team, that for them to do their work, the development life cycle, speed that up. So we have several innovation ideas like that. And then things around taxpayer services. So just recently we have put out a pilot where a taxpayer can take a picture of their document on a phone and just simply upload it to the IRS. And we'll receive it and we'll process it. And the second leg of that would be it'll seamlessly go into a case file or even trigger a new case, open up a new case, and add the file into the case and trigger a workflow. So these sorts of innovations are just going to really improve by leaps and bounds the taxpayer services that we are envisioning we will be providing. And then lastly, it's always a priority. Filing season in the IRS here to serve all the compliant and not tax-paying entities. They will file their taxes. We've got to have our door open and take the returns in, process them, and push out the refunds. And then we also have lots of legislative mandates, right? For example, the big one we are working right now at this moment is the Advanced Child Care Tax Credit. So it came up with the recently passed legislation called the American Rescue Plan, or ARP. That was just passed with the new administration, I would say about a month and a half back. And there are several provisions and there are tax implications that we have projects kicking off. But the first big one would be the Advanced Child Care Tax Credit. And so there are several others like that, and we will have to deliver on them. That's why we're here to implement the tax law and then enforce the tax law as well. So our package of looking ahead really is across the board, as you see, in terms of looking at new technology, across data, across cyber, across legacy transformation, across taxpayer experience, while we have to take care of routine business. Stay open, stay secure, stay safe, and serve the public and do taxes. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause and end my prepared comments. I wanted to give a really broad swath to introduce what all we are doing because there's a lot going on. It's a very exciting time to be in the IRS that I'm very proud of. I'm happy to take care of questions if the audience has any. So back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Sid. A really nice run through there, of which we massively appreciate. A really nice story that was told there as well. I want to just quickly go back to the mod plan. You said that was formulated back in 2019. What were the kind of original conversations around that, and how long did it take to kind of strategize and formulate the mod plan?
Absolutely. So it was published in 2019, the early part of that calendar year in 2019. The formulation did take, I would say, 4+ months. Now there have been, so what that did was really brought some rigor and structure in our story about the modernization. Because by then we were doing certain things that we would classify as modernization. But what that program allowed is to really take a full enterprise stack look as to what's going on in our enterprise. Let's take a look at the budget. Let's take a look at our priorities and to structure and create a cohesive story, because ultimately all of these programs at the underpinning of it is the architecture of our IT, right?
Yeah.
Our data, our systems, and the tech stack that we run things on. And so we realized that there's more common in all of these systems. I mean, one of the data points that I'd like to share is we have 600 plus systems, at least officially registered in our application catalog,
Mm.
that we are supporting and servicing that the business is using. And then there are probably at least another 50 to 100 more that are not necessarily business facing, but internal IT type tools and technologies, or applications, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big footprint. So
Mm.
we looked into that. We looked into how are we going to really go into common data, common platforms, common architecture. So we wove together a comprehensive plan. So that formulation took a while, and at that moment, we worked with Treasury, even with the Secretary of Treasury back then, Steve Mnuchin, and who was a big supporter of, like, okay, IRS, you got to have a plan. And I mentioned, we've had a decade of sort of hard reality in the being in the IRS. It was, we were under the microscope. There's been some things which really caused our funding to have gone down progressively over many years. And we've lost people through attrition without necessarily being able to hire them back.
Yeah.
So in terms of funding and resources, we have lots of challenges. So
Yeah.
back in 2018, the summer, I would say, of 2018, we started to kind of really package this up to say, we've got to have a real North Star. Where are we headed? Where are we
Yeah.
going? What are all our priorities? We cannot do just one and not the other. We got to really take a look at what all is important to us. And that's
Yeah.
how the formulation of a plan, we were calling it an IT plan, and then it became a mod plan, then it became a
Yeah.
business IT plan. So eventually it went through certain iterations. And as you know, we had to go through reviews and approvals up the chain, all the way up
Mm.
to OMB. So, but that's how we kind of got to it. So it was a process. It was definitely a journey.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of being there, helping build that with my CIO back then to create that mod plan.
Nice, and it's great to hear you saying that as an organisation, you need to find your North Star. Without kind of identifying that North Star, it gives so much direction towards whatever transformation or modernisation goal there is in place. So it's good to kind of hear you say that. We've had some interesting questions come in as well from the audience. I'm going to start with one about the contractor community. So a question come in here on how do you solicit innovative ideas from the contractor community?
Oh, absolutely. So we work closely with our procurement office, and I think our procurement office is the chief procurement officer's department is great. Shanna Weber's, and we also had Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith has a new role. He's now a co-director in the businesses, has a new office. But Harrison Smith but more now Shanna Weber's, they have a great presence in the community, actually very active presence, in fact. But we
Mm.
work very closely with them. We're constantly running different kinds of RFIs to seek new ideas. I believe there was a tool. I'm using the word tool probably not quite accurately, but it's some kind of a technique that they came up with, which they call Pilot IRS, where we
Mhm.
would be able to sort of come with a roughly roughly right idea, but not specifications. Roughly right idea, and go to market with some, hey, open biz, like what can you do? Bring
Yeah.
in, sort of select through and kind of funnel them through a process where you work with a vague, broad idea, but then narrow down very quickly based on the dialogue we have.
Yeah.
I think we have used that technique in a few instances, but we also work with the integrator community. We have partnerships with many of the big business, the big providers and the medium and small providers across the board. So
Mm.
that's kind of, I guess, I hope that addresses the question.
Yeah. No.
In terms of internally innovation, there is a, it's one of those things that, there's more to be done, and aspirationally we feel like we haven't reached where we would like to be. But there are really some good ideas that have come over the last many years. I mean, things such as doing bots. One of the first things we did, we had a big Windows upgrade project. We said, why don't we use a bot to answer questions, right? Because let's cut down on the IT help desk phone volume.
Mm.
So let's just get a taste of our own meal, right, before we serve it to others.
Yeah.
So we started with those types of things, and there are different ideas that we try out in a lab environment. But I
Okay.
think there's a lot more opportunity we have. terms of really trying out innovative things. But
Sure.
it's getting more exciting. I think, as I mentioned, the other effort was it's actually in production, and but a very small use case in which you can take a picture on your phone and upload it to the IRS. We'll take it and process it.
Sure. And I think the next question I was going to put to you has kind of been answered there as well. It was about how does the IRS breed innovation? And I think you just alluded to there that you potentially have an innovation kind of lab set up, where you can, have a safe space to test ideas and to approach best, import best practice. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we've
Yeah.
got actually several different labs. If you really, in fact, based on what you call a lab, we probably have over half a dozen of them.
Sure.
But definitely we are trying to actually create a bit of a programmatic view, if you will, so that while we want to decentralize ideation, we want to sort of tie it to some problem solving and not just sort of just pure creative thinking, because we are a constrained organization. So how do we balance creativity with specific targeted problems we want to solve? So we are trying to kind of create some kind of a lightweight, if you will, review and governance and guidance process, but allow innovation. The one more thing that happened, and I think that's probably a new or a first, it just occurred in the last couple of months back. In January, we ran an IRS hackathon. So we actually did that. I would say it's a closed hackathon. I do not know actually. I think it was a closed hackathon, but it was open to all our contractor community too. So employees, contractors, you team up. There was a range of problems that were given to them. They could pick which one they want to work on, and then run a hackathon. Like they got 5 days to come up with a solution and make presentations. It got a lot of very good positive vibe. People loved it. And some really good ideas came out from there as well. I mean, in fact, we are now looking at, let's pick up some of these to make it a real thing. Like let's fund it to make it a project and production. So we will be doing more of those hackathons. As I said, it was a closed hackathon, but whether it'll be an open one or not, I'm not so sure at this point. But that was another thing that we just did recently.
Well, it sounds like you're really. I mean, it's clear to see that it's a very innovative organization of the way it operates and thinks, and that's obviously evident how quickly things were able to be rolled out during the pandemic as well. So, kudos to you and your team and the IRS for that. I just want to finish on one last thing. You'd mentioned about the process of modernization, obviously within that presentation, but I wanted to find out a bit more about how you go about prioritizing each step, and how does that work? For any other kind of leader that might be going about modernization, what's the kind of the step by step, and how should they look at that, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. So I'm going to take your question as how do we prioritize where to modernize or what to modernize, right? Okay. So it's kind of a multi-step process. So there is we've got to apply at least couple of constraints to this puzzle. One is the funding constraint. So we do have I think it's a pretty well-established process in the IRS that we run. It's tedious, it's painful to go through, but it is a good process, which is sort of really we have this 2-year ideation cycle. Like what new efforts are needed from a business, right? When I say business, I mean the IT's customers, our business units. So business has an ideation process. They often have good idea about their directions and some of the needs, both for legislatively mandated requirements or otherwise modernization of the business processes and functions and taxpayer interaction, etc. So that ideation process has a cycle, right? And then we go through kind of a demand management process and all of that. But the other constraint is on the technology side. And this is where we are really investing a lot of energy in kind of really thinking about our architecture, our technology stack, right? And so one of the things we did, and it was done about right after we published the mod plan, we came up with a set of guiding principles. Like that will guide us the how. So how will we do so that technology decisions are made in a cohesive, organized, and reviewed and approved. So we're applying architectural governance, technology governance processes to choose what to do and how to do. We got to get better at sort of timing when to do that, and that's where the overall mod plan has helping us. Because prior to that, there was actually a time where we would still be doing lots of big projects, but they would be really run as just their own program. But now we are bringing everything together, and we are tying everything to a common architectural framework. As I said, the view as a North Star at the target, where are we headed? And sometimes we don't have a clear answer, like, hey, what are we supposed to do for this specific issue? Don't have an answer, but give us some time, give us an opportunity to work it out. We'll come back with a clearer articulation of our target. So we're definitely trying. Our principles are have a clear goal and do the right thing the first time, right? Of course, unless you cannot because of funding constraint or you have to deploy something legislatively. But that said, generally speaking, it's really using funding and using common architecture, guiding principles as a way to sort of prioritize our work.
Perfect. Well, Sid, that's all we've got time for today. But it's been a real pleasure to have you with us. Really interesting presentation on your modernization. It's great to see that mod plan as well, and to have that explained by someone working on it. So I do thank you for joining, for taking the time to do so, and for answering those questions.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, Chris. If people have questions, certainly I'm happy to answer them offline, if that makes sense. So thanks for the opportunity. Everybody have a wonderful day and take care.
Thank you, Sid.